You're looking forward to a better 2021? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys Radio. My special guest this week is astrologer extraordinaire Jeff Harman. We're going to talk about next year in depth. It all begins at 8 p.m. Pacific time on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. The podcast and my YouTube drop worldwide Thursday. Guys Radio. Happy New Year. Okay, Guys Radio, my very special guest is somebody I want to get on the show at this time of year because he's an astrologer. His name is Jeff Harman, very well known. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Second generation astrologer, which we're going to learn about, spiritual consultant, exorcist, property clearer. He's got 40 years of experience. He believes conscious self-awareness can lead us out of the matrix of our karmic past, which is a really good thing, where the soul's journey is revealed in the ancient systems of classical, Vedic, and Kabbalistic astrology. So 3 different types of astrology. He also does personal business readings, location astrology, corrective measures he offers also, which is to help design custom natural untreated gemstone talismans also. He's solved many paranormal cases, hauntings, UFO related events, possessions, clearing homes, commercial spaces. He's worked in many areas of the entertainment industry, so I'll ask him about that. And he's got some patent technology and has been contracted to perform forensic work with the federal, state, and local governments as a sound expert. So a lot of different stuff going on here and a lot of different types of clients. And I'm really pleased to welcome Jeff to Guys Radio. How you doing, Jeff?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on.
So there's so much here to unpack. Let's start at the beginning. The first thing that stuck out is that you are a second generation astrologer. How'd you get into it? Was it your dad, your mom? How did it all start?
My mother. And I actually didn't believe in astrology. This was back in the mid 70s. I had just started driving, and my mother would peg my girlfriends to the T. And I would say, how do you know that much about her? And she would say, well, I've got her chart. And I said, well, what do you mean you got her chart? And she said, well, I have her astrological chart. And she would go on into details that were pretty amazing for mother's intuition. I said, well, let me check this stuff out, because I was skeptical. You know, we've all heard the phrase that the doctor in the delivery room has more gravity than Saturn, right? We've heard that. And all these skeptical stuff. And I was definitely in that camp. And the more I started looking into it, the more fascinated I became. And I didn't exclusively do astrology a lot through the 80s and 90s. I was doing some of the things that you mentioned. I had a studio when we were doing commercials. That was back in the days of the reel-to-reel tapes. You know, we were doing commercial soundtracks. We were doing a lot of radio stuff, and I was also playing around a lot with film stuff. And at the same time, I was paralleling, looking at why one person would come in, you know, was a violinist, you know, union musician, and the next one would have a bone through their nose playing punk rock, you know. And you get to see the entire walk of life. And then I started getting into the forensics work. This whole time I was paralleling with astrology. And it wasn't until probably I would say late 80s that I really started locking into a lot of the ancient techniques, which are basically pre-1700s. Most people don't know this, but people like Galileo and Newton and many, many others, they were called astronomers, but they were actually, that's what astrology was back then. And as we get back into the Egyptian, Greek, and medieval times, of course, the Egyptian and the Greek ancient times were much before that, I found that the cohesive usage of astrology in many different areas was kind of mind-boggling, and how accurate it was. And it still is today. That's what's amazing. Even if you don't believe it, it's very, very accurate. I think one of the types of astrology that's really useful for people is location astrology, seeing where to live. And I really can't share a screen right now unless you made me be the host, but I could show you there's maps that have specific longitude and latitudes of your own personal ley lines. And then you have cycles known as transits and progressions. And it's really amazing how accurate it is. I've actually had doctors who said to me, Jeff, I'm dying. what can I do to improve? I've tried every allopathic thing. I've tried every medical thing that we know to save myself. Is there anything astrology could offer? And I would say, well, there's several things. One is where you live. And I had one gentleman, very dear friend of mine, move to a sun ascending line. I said, Jim, his name was Dr. Jim. I said, go to a sun ascending line. And he did. And his PSA started dropping out of the sky. And he went into remission for the entire time he was there. And then financially, he couldn't stay there. And he ended up moving back to another location. And I said, Jim, don't move there. Within 6 months, it came right back. Within another 3, he was gone. So, and I've seen this repeatedly for different areas of life. So it's very fascinating stuff. And again, you were mentioning the gemstones, and natural untreated gemstones really have an effect on people. I've actually worked with doctors on that issue, and they've seen vital sign changes that were not explainable any other way when we put the correct gemstones on. Pretty interesting stuff.
Now, you work in 3 different types of astrology: Vedic, classical, and Kabbalistic. What is, for our listeners, what's the difference between those 3?
Well, they're very different disciplines, and I would say there's actually more than that. The perception of astrology is we're all our sun signs. Like most people know what their sun sign is. They'll say, oh, geez, I'm a Pisces, or I'm an Aries, or I'm a Gemini, or whatever sun sign they are. I always call that love, light, and cluelessness. It's certainly good for pop, I think, interest in astrology. But when you look at the ancient systems, they are so superior because it looks at us really as these incarnations. A lot of people don't believe in past lives. A lot of people do. I certainly do, especially now that I've really been delving deeper and deeper into the Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology comes from very ancient India. They don't know exactly where it came from. Some of it was in Tamil, Sanskrit, and very ancient languages. And it clearly goes back thousands of years. And I am just enamored at how accurate it is about the families we grow up in, the environments we are subjected to. When you think about a person being born, I think all of us could safely say the least amount of free will we have is the parents we were born to and the environment we grew up in, right? So think about that. All those impinging factors are just absolutely colossal on every individual's life.
Sure.
Some children are adopted. They grew up with a silver spoon. Others are treated horribly. So there's all these variables in between. And I think what's fascinating to me is some of the documents that the religions threw out years and years ago, probably somewhere between the 1st and the 5th century, are very interesting how this stuff reflects that we actually are reincarnational beings, and that oftentimes what we get in terms of our environment and our upbringing is past karmas that are coming through. Now, that stuff sounds hard to believe for some people, but I absolutely have to say there's no other logical reason. I get the blessing of working with psychiatrists and psychologists. I actually work with some people in prisons. And it's amazing when you look at the why of someone's life and you try and analyze that from a linear perspective and say, okay, well, what psychologically or psychiatrically would have caused this person to end up where they did? There's no explanations. It's not just upbringing. It's not just genetics, but there's other forces going on. So this gets into a real deep dive into who we are, I think, as people. And the cycles are amazing. And again, that's very intriguing to me. And it was probably in the 90s, I just started doing it full time. It kind of found me. And it's amazing. I've actually got people in very interesting places throughout the globe that utilize this stuff. The founding fathers of this country were known to use it. The Masons were, Washington, D.C. is known as the District of Columbia. And of course, I call it the District of Criminals right now. But I know you didn't want to get political, but I had to put that one in there. But in all seriousness, when people analyze the amazing architecture in Washington, D.C., it was all put together by a French architect and the Masons in a very occult way. The street layouts, the dimensions of the buildings, the positioning of the buildings, the types of buildings. It is exceedingly occult. And I think it was Benjamin Franklin himself said that no person of stature would ever commence an event like a wedding, a contract signing, et cetera, without first looking at the energetics in the astrology. And that's known as electional astrology. I do a ton of that. I do medical elections for people. Of course, a lot of the doctors don't, we don't tell them about it. I just get the person to say, oh, I've got to go in for elective surgery for whatever it is. And I'll have them get a bunch of dates, and then I'll pick the best date out of those. So it's really fun. It really is. And trips too, wedding dates I do, selling real estate I do a lot. And realtors are amazed by this. They say, well, geez, we put this property on the market and nobody was interested in it, or we couldn't sell it. And I said, well, when did you put it on the market? And they said, oh, it was this day and this time. I said, well, when the contract runs out, I'll usually say it to the client. I'll say, let's re-sign it and put it up at a good time. And invariably, we sell the thing in very quick, short times that are inexplicable based on the past history of trying to sell it. So it's called electional astrology. It's really
so what are the factors that determine when is the best time to do some of these things?
It's all geometry. When you look at, all of us live at different places on the earth, right? So you have the eastern horizon, or you could say the longitude and latitude of where we live. And of course, today in modern technology, we all have GPS, we have Google Earth, we got our iPhones. We can not only see the exact longitude and latitude we're at, we can see, how high we are above sea level. So that is the eastern horizon for where you are. So the geometry of the influences of, you could say, all of the rulers of the zodiac, it gets complex really quick. It's very complex mathematics and geometry. But when you have good configurations, just for instance, the moon, we all know the moon has a huge effect on the cycles every month. And what happens is lunar aspects alone, like I'll talk to people who got married and they'll say, God, what happened? After 3 years, it just, went horrible. And I'll look at when they got married, and invariably I will see a progression, like the moon was applying 3 degrees to a conjunction of Mars or an opposition. And of course, that equates to 3 years in what we call a primary direction. So this is all math. It's really interesting. It's geometry and math to the celestial arrangements, which are constantly changing. I mean, like one of the reasons the world is so, I think, divided right now is because we just had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I've had people asking me about this for years, for probably 10, 15 years. Jeff, what do you think of the Mayan calendar? I said, not a thing. Can't come up with a thing for the Mayan calendar. Jesus is not coming. The world's not ending. Can't come up with anything. And then what happened was I said, watch out for 2020. I said, 2020 has a plethora of energies that are hitting. We had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And we just literally days ago, last week, we had the Jupiter Saturn conjunction. And before that, we had Jupiter-Pluto, I meant to say. And what did we end up with? I mean, have you ever seen a year like this? The pandemic, the division, the riots, the election, which isn't settled. So, the celestial influences really seem to affect what happens here.
Okay. So we've got a new conjunction. Let's just pick it up from right now, which was supposedly December 21st.
That's right.
So
it was on the winter solstice, right?
Yeah. What does that mean? And what do you see happening based on that?
Well, I think it indicates, these conjunctions, Jupiter and Saturn, happen every 20 years. And if people remember, what happened 20 years ago? We had the Bush-Gore election. Remember that?
Yep.
That was disputed. And we thought Gore was going to be in. And of course, Bush ended up. Well, every 20 years these happen, but this one was significant because about every 240 years, they change what we call elements. Elements are earth, air, fire, and water. A lot of people in modern science laugh at that because they say, well, wait a minute, we've got an atomic table, right? And in physics, we have all this exceedingly detailed things. But when you look at it from a bird's eye view, everything can be broken down to those four elements: solid, liquids, gas, and kinetics, right? Earth, air, fire, and water. So the Jupiter and Saturn just joined for the first time since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution into a new air sign. And people might say, what does that mean? I think we're entering a high-tech era unlike we've never seen. I think we're going to see shelved energies or energies that have been around but haven't been commercially feasible come out. I think we're going to see explosions in genetics, medicine, transportation, communications that are going to be like the Jetsons in the next 20, 30 years. I really do. And the infrastructure is there to happen. The last time this happened like this was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And boy, do we see some changes there, huh?
Okay. Jeff Harman, astrologer, is my special guest on Guys Radio. Okay, so let's get right to it, Jeff. Okay, we're at this point. Today is December 1. We're doing this interview is December 26th. So we've got a whole bunch of political things coming up the next week. Early January, we have the Electoral College meeting on the 5th or the 6th, and then we have the inauguration on the 20th. And then we've got the whole COVID thing and the stimulus package. Can you give us some overview on what you see kind of in the cards, if you will, or in the stars, actually?
Well, what the charts indicate, and what I'm using to see this, is something known as interrogation astrology. Interrogation is literally divinational. It's where you cast a chart for the moment and ask a question. And I've had repeatedly people from politics to other people just asking questions. And the big question is Trump going to win? Or is he lost? Now, if you listen to the main MSM mainstream media, clearly he's going to be gone, right? He should be drying his eyes and clearing out his desk as we speak. Contrary to what the mainstream media and other people are saying, I still see Trump winning. I think this is a disputed election. He hasn't conceded. Now, if he conceded, we could say it was over, but he hasn't conceded. So what I would say that I'm seeing is from the tools I'm using is that we're going to see, and I think we've already seen, we just haven't heard about it, a lot of things happen. I think the month of January, particularly from New Year's Eve forward, and even this week, we're going to start to hear a lot of information coming out. I think it's going to be suppressed by certain areas of the media, but in the end, we may not even have an inauguration on time. I'm not sure about that. The only thing I can tell you is it doesn't look like Biden is ultimately going to be president. That's what I can tell you. And I think there's going to be division in this country and unrest over the next 3-4 years because of it.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people say, the mainstream media and cover up and all that. How do you explain then the Supreme Court and all those court cases?
Good question. The Supreme Court isn't done. From what I've heard, only a few cases have been thrown out by the Trump's administration or Sidney Powell. Most of those have been other people bringing them to court. And, that's the whole thing. When you look at all the left brain linear references, the news, the Supreme Court, the state legislators, on and on and on, the Electoral College, someone listening to me would say, you got to be psychotic to even think Trump could have a chance. He's got less than a snowball's chance in hell of winning this election. And yet that's what the charts keep saying, that somehow this is going to come unraveled and the voter fraud is going to get exposed. And again, I'm just looking at objectively, what does the chart say?
What do you see for Trump's health in the next year?
His health doesn't look problematic, not right away, but after a year, he could run into some problems. There is some progressions that he has coming over him in 2022 through 2023 that could be problematic.
Mm-hmm. How about your thoughts on the United States? We were born on July 4th, 1776. I guess that's technically the date. Tell us about what you see for our country.
Well, that's what I was just mentioning a minute ago. The next few years looks really like a lot of changes and a lot of challenges. I don't think you need astrology to see that. But, what's interesting is how the two mirror each other. I would say that particularly in 2023 and 2024, this next election, there's going to be some really powerful things. There's a Pluto conjunction. In other words, for the first time in the existence of the United States, there's some very powerful energies coming in 2022 through 2024 that I think are going to really remake this country. I actually see it quite possibly much more positively. I think we're already in a war. And I think China has infiltrated this place far greater than people realize. And I don't think it's just China. There seems to be forces that have been really coming in here. Mike Pompeo gave a talk to the governors, I think it was about 8 months ago, and they actually had people listed who were compromised. And very interesting stuff when you start looking at the head of the Senate, which is Mitch McConnell and his wife, and the relationships and the business deals, and you look at Pelosi and her husband. So it's really interesting stuff that I think is all going to start coming unraveled here over the next year or so, and it might be a lot sooner than that. The United States has transiting Saturn, conjuncting the South Node in the United States chart. And people may say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means disruption. And when does that happen? This March. So I think from basically the first of the year all the way into the latter part of March, we're going to see some serious convulsions in this country. And that's what the charts say.
Yeah. Let's talk about the climate. I don't want to get into like climate denying or climate change denying or acknowledging that, but what do you see happening around the Earth? Because so many people have talked about more earthquakes and more violent storms and this and that. What do you see from a climate standpoint as to what's going to happen, regardless of what's causing it?
There's something called the grand solar minimum. I actually think we could be going into a colder spell rather than a warming spell. And, like you said, I don't want to get into the politicization of all this climate change stuff because it's gotten highly political and there seems to be all kinds of motivations behind each side of the fence. But, I really think as far as any gargantuan cataclysms, I can't see anything right away. I mean, we're always going to have earthquakes. We're always going to have tsunamis and tornadoes. That is a normal cycle of things. And the sun certainly seems to affect that. There's a lot of science on that. As far as what I can see, I really think when the Hebrew calendar runs out, right around that time, which is just a couple hundred years from now, that's when we could look at some kind of an axis tip. Now, I could be wrong, but that's there's something known as the precession of the equinoxes, and many people believe this last Jupiter-Saturn conjunction brought us into the age of Aquarius. And I don't believe that that's true. I think we just had a conjunction in the first tropical sign of Aquarius, which is very powerful. But I don't know that I see anything that I can pick up. And some of these forces are beyond what any science or astrology can fully grasp. These are very divine and very high and powerful matters. When you start talking about axis tips, I can tell you one thing. I think the consciousness of the human race will probably affect when that axis tip happens. Because the two seem to be linked. That's one of the mysteries of Vedic astrology. There's an ancient system called Nadi. It's Nadi. And it's astounding. When you see what we call the eclipse points in every person's chart line up in very specific ways, you will exit the body. I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times, and I've had friends and family. I've even seen health and disease be affected by these. They're like shadows that play on everyone's soul. And it's pretty safe to say no one will get out of here alive, right? So in order for I can predict that 100%. For the axis to alter, we're going to dynamically alter many, many things, I think, from a very deep karmic perspective. We read in the Bible, many of the ancient saints and prophets were believed to live hundreds of years. Remember that? And they refer to that. And a lot of people, poo-poo that and say, well, how could that be? I'm not so sure that isn't true. And the more I look at the ancient Vedic astrology and the Egyptian, there's overwhelming scientific evidence that the axis wasn't in the place it is now. So as that changes, and right now we've got science that's saying the magnetic north is moving, right, and it's rapidly moving. They had to reset GPS. I mean, this is aviation, had to do some real serious things on that. So yeah, it certainly could be soon. Soon would be a couple hundred years.
Okay.
I mean, it could happen tomorrow. We don't know.
All right. Let's bring it down to some more practical aspects. So my special guest on Guys Radio, Jeff Harman, astrologer. I love this conversation. I hope we can make it an annual meeting. So let's start with, okay, if you're going to work with somebody, when we were in touch, I sent my information, my birth date, location, and my time of birth. When you're going to work with somebody, an individual, do you use traditional, Kabbalistic, Vedic? What's your process? And then what do you find out? And tell us, for our listeners, what you found out about me, so they get a taste as to how you work and what you come up with.
Okay. Well, first off, I apologize. Camille didn't tell me she sent the birth data, so I didn't work on you. Sorry. Okay. But what I would tell you is that I have like 3 sheets that I fill out, and I spend about 40 minutes prior to doing a reading, or at least a half an hour, filling out all these different sheets. So I use location astrology, I use Vedic astrology, and there's actually 3 different types inside Vedic astrology. Plus I use what we call classical or traditional, which is kind of been dubbed Kabbalistic, but it's really Egyptian. It's an amalgam of Egyptian, Greek, and medieval astrology. So I use several types, and I list all that out so that I have all these notes. And the cool thing today is we have the internet and Zoom. If you made me the host, I could show you some of this stuff, which would be fascinating. All you got to do is go under someplace and make me the host, and I can actually share a screen and show you things. But what I do is I look at all kinds of things that help to see the cycles, and also location astrology, the transits and progressions. Many people have moved to a different location than where they were born. That drastically affects the cycles you go through throughout your life. And what I end up with is a reading that you make a video of, and you can play it back, and you can see all these location points. You can see all your cycles. Like I always say, life is a 3-act stage play. Act 1 is from birth to the first Saturn return when you're about 28, 29. Act 2 is from there to 58 to 59. Okay. And then that's the beginning of Act 3. And Act 3 is then up to about 84 to 86. And I figure after that, it's the reprise and the exit music, right? If you make it past that, you're doing good. So
have you ever done your own chart?
Oh God, a lot. Yes. I think most people who study this stuff start out studying their own charts.
What did you, by doing all the work you've done over years, what's been the biggest surprise in terms of combining the classic Vedic Kabbalistic astrology, all the different things you've worked on with different people, forensics, ETs, paranormal, whatever. What's kind of like the big highlights and the big surprises you've gotten? Things that you just didn't think, oh, wow, these really, oh, wow moments.
I think the biggest oh, wow is, for me, seeing that we, contrary to what anyone believes, we are really spiritual beings having a physical experience, and that we're in an interactive consciousness. And I love working with psychiatrists and psychologists. You'd be surprised at how many of them really like the Vedic astrology, particularly. That to me is amazing. Like I'll get people who will call me up and ask a question, and that's where I use interrogation. You don't need your birth chart, don't need anything. You just give me the question. So you cast the chart, and I'll give them the answer. And a lot of times they'll tell me I'm nuts. Oh, geez, how could that be? And then they'll call me back a month later and say, oh my God, I can't believe it. It came out just like that.
So what's the information, Jeff, that you need if somebody asks you a question to be able to ascertain?
A question. That's it.
Okay. So if I ask you a question right now, you could give. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
All right. I'm building this guys radio career.
Okay. So hang on here once. Career upcoming.
It's a brand, it's not just the radio.
Okay, so you can't see what I'm doing right now. I wish you could. If you figure out a way to make me the host, I can put you right online. You'd see this. It's really easy on Zoom. Super easy.
I'm not sure, and we're recording right now, so let's just keep going.
Yeah, it wouldn't disrupt your recording. Well, it shows you're looking at different ways to do this right now. A little bit.
I just
not 100%.
I'm changing you as host. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Let me come back here. Well, you did. All right, good. So now I should be able to share the screen. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Perfect. Okay. So you'll see here what I'm doing. This is the chart I just cast. Wow. So I know this looks like gobbledygook and people, their eyeballs will cross. But see, the eastern horizon is you, the querent. So this is literally the eastern horizon where I'm at. Notice I cast this chart today, and literally at this time in West Hills, California, where I happen to be located. Okay. So your career is the 10th house, right where the sun is at noon. What I like here is the moon is beholding. It looks good. It shows that as long as you keep it creative and not get bogged down into any one topic, it really looks good. Kind of like you're doing. You're keeping an eclectic approach to it. I like it. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. I think it's going to pick up a lot in 3 or 4 months is what it shows.
Okay. Place to live. My family moved from New York City after I was there 30 years.
You know what? I apologize. Let me crank you in here. This is awesome. You can actually see. Okay, spell your name first and last so I get it right on. Hang on 1 second here. There you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Robert Manni, Manni.
NNI. Okay, good. And what time?
12:26 a.m.
And where at?
Jersey City, New Jersey.
All right.
So we're wondering, we came out to California about a year ago. We're in San Diego, and we're wondering, where should we live? Should we stay here? Is it, it's too crowded?
I was in Hudson County.
We're in San Diego right now.
No. I say where you were born was in Hudson County, right? I just make sure I get the right.
I think so. I think Hudson County. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, good. See what that did, just FYI here, you can see it logged what we call the longitude and latitude of your location where you were born. See, what astrology really is it's a snapshot. See, you can see right here, this is your name, right? Your birth date. I got everything right, 12:26 a.m., right?
Yep.
Okay, Jersey City, notice that's the longitude and latitude. Yep. This is the Earth in the middle. So watch. Now, if we fire this, okay, this is really fascinating. This is location astrology. And obviously, since we're in the good old US of A, let me just see. So you are down in San Diego, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you are right next to a moon I see land. I'll bet you like it here, don't you?
I do like it.
You bet. Yeah. See, notice these big, thick lines have a 300-mile influence to the east, but they have a long sloping influence to the west. If you've ever taken a physics class, you'll have heard of something called the inverse square law. That's a fancy term like light sight and sound, when you get right on one of these lines, that's like going to a concert and standing in front of the stage. Your pant legs are vibrating, right? So when you're 200 miles away, that's like in the middle of the row. When you're 300 miles away, that's like being out in the parking lot with the door closed. You hear the band booming inside the concert hall, but you're not right there. So you're in a strong influence. If we look here at where you're at, let's get you a detailed map. So you're down in San Diego. So if we measure here from San Diego back to the moon, you can see that's miles right up there. So you're just about 100 miles east of that moon IC line. Plain English, well, here's a descriptor for that. Moon IC is real warm and fuzzy with the home and the family. See, you can read all this at your leisure. Since you're recording, you can pause your thing and see. So this is some text of what it's like. But that's a good line. I like it. Also, you are a little bit east of this Venus line, but you may be a little east to feel much of it. See, if I measure to that, notice up there, you're about 385, 387 miles to the east. So that tapers off. San Francisco or Northern California might even be better. But you're good. You're good where you're at. I always tell folks the best place to live is Sun, Jupiter, and Venus lines. See, many people here, I'll show you something that's pretty cool. If I can.
So just while Jeff's doing this, just for our listeners out there who aren't on our YouTube, Jeff is now, we've flipped the show over. So we're following his screen and how he does his work. Now we're looking at something, your auric field with the tree of life. It's really fascinating. So check out our YouTube. Just go to Robert Manni, my name, and it'll pick up the YouTube channel if you want to see all the visuals. Go ahead, Jeff.
Many people in the Judeo-Christian religions will remember the Lord's Prayer. Well, here's something that's really, really cool that I always like to show people. Most folks will touch their head, say, "Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen," at the end, right? If you're Jewish, you'll know it different in the Hebrew. But the bottom line is, we know the heart is right here in the heart chakra. The reproductive organs are here. Everything is the sun, which is God's seed, the moon, which is the crucible of creation. Dad puts the seed in mom's womb and out comes a baby. Where? On the four elements of the earth, between mom's feet. Why do I tell you that? Is because all the glyphs of the planets are combinations of the circle, the crescent, and the cross. Look at Saturn is the cross over the crescent of the moon. Jupiter is the crescent of the moon over the cross. Venus is the sun over the cross. And Mars, the ancient symbol, was the cross over the sun. Mercury, the alchemical messenger, and also logic, is the crescent over the sun over the cross. So why do I tell you that? Well, anytime you get next to the moon, it's always very generative. It tends to nurture. It's the cradle. It's like the womb. It always makes you kind of rejuvenate things or create things. Venus is always pleasurable. So even though Venus is not real close, if you moved up the coast, it would be. See, now you can see it comes on because California. So location astrology is really fascinating stuff. Notice these horizontal lines. These are known as latitude crossings. Okay. And people always ask me, "Jeff, show me the best place to go live." And I always say, best, good, and bad is not descriptive enough. There's many more flavors on the menu. It's like a multiple ice cream shop. You have so many different energies. Notice what I just turned on here. These are called aspects. This is geometric aspects. So I like San Diego. Notice you have Jupiter, the crescent of the moon over the cross. See that Jupiter's like a divine scooping up the energy and concretizing it through the cross of matter, which is our reality, right? You have Uranus and the sun all beholding trines to these angles. See, ascending means the eastern horizon. It's personal. IC means home, family, real estate. MC always means career. And, you got to get used to this. But once you do, it's really a wonderful language. So I like San Diego for you. Why? You've got a lot of good energies here. You really do. See, these are favorable. Anytime you see a trine, if anybody's taken a geometry class, we know triangles, isosceles triangles, are 120 degrees, right? So that's a very smooth flowing energy. So I like it. San Diego's good. You did good moving there. You live right in San Diego or what?
Yes, in San Diego, right?
Oh, nice. I like San Diego. It's a nice town. You know, The Wizard of Oz was written at a hotel down there in San Diego. You know that, don't you?
I did not know that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, Baum, I think it was in the early 1900s, had written The Wizard of Oz. I forget which hotel it was, but right in San Diego. And he tried to make the movie, and he did make a movie actually, but it wasn't successful. The book was amazingly successful. And then he died. And of course, MGM came along with Victor Fleming and made it in 1939. And now we've all seen that. Okay. And we'll continue to.
Let's flip the screen to get us back to where we were, because I need to get the host, because we're going to have to wrap.
Yeah.
In a minute. So listen, Jeff Harman, astrologer, amazing. Guys Radio. Here we are. So flip me back. So am I the host now? Okay, of my show?
Yeah. You're back to your own show now. Go ahead. Okay. You see yourself? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Listen, you've done fantastic. Tell everybody out there where they can learn more about you and where they can hire you for your services. It's amazing.
Yeah. The easiest way is Jeff, Jeff, at jeffharman.com. HARMAN.com. So it's Jeff at jeffharman.com. And my wife is amazing. She takes all the emails. But I think today it's so fun doing this stuff. I have clients all over the world because you can do it on Zoom like this.
Exactly. All right. Yeah. Thanks for being on Guys Radio. And it would be a blast. Let's come back and do it again and see if some of these things you mentioned came true. And we'll have some fun with it. But thank you so much, Jeff Harman, astrologer on Guys Radio.
You bet. Thank you. Bye.